Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast, where we interview growers from all over the world, both beginners and experts, seeking to learn more about what they know about gardening and how they do things in their garden. What's up, everybody? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Grow It, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 178. In this episode, I interview Simon from Plant Studio. He was on the podcast once before, episode 37, where he discussed building a fully automated grow environment. In this episode, we continue the conversation on automation, this time focusing on larger grow spaces. Simon has retrofitted a shipping container with several automated systems. He shares insights on that process, along with the many challenges he's faced growing in a large-scale environment. If you want to see short clips of these podcast episodes, search Garden Talk Clips on YouTube. I also have a gardening channel where I show the plants that I grow. Both of those channels will be linked down in the YouTube description section below. One of my goals for this podcast is to bring free information about gardening to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who helped make that goal possible. Thanks to AC Infinity for sponsoring this episode. Check out their CloudRay S9 oscillating fan. This 9-inch fan features a redesigned build with carbon steel gears and IP44 rating. It has 10 precise levels of fan speeds and dynamic wind modes, which allow you to recreate the natural flow of air so your plants feel as if they're outside. There's more to it, so click the link in the description section below so you can learn more about their CloudRay S9 oscillating fan. And the discount code MrGrowIt15 works on both Amazon and their website, acinfinity.com/blend. Several additives in one blend, so you no longer have to buy individual bottles. Check it out at stashblend.com, link in the description section below, and use the discount code THESTASH. And we are back, and I'm joined with Simon from Plant Studio. How you doing today?
Great. How you doing?
Good, man. Welcome back to the podcast. We last linked up on episode 37 back in October of 2021. Gosh, every time I have folks that come on for a second time, that it's been several years, I'm like, how has it been that long? Time just flies, huh?
Yeah, it does. Sure does.
Man, how's everything been with you?
Great. Everything's good. Learned a lot about myself regarding cultivation. Realizing, looking back on the first podcast and realizing how I've evolved myself as a person and also really as a cultivator, really kind of better understanding of what it is that I like about this part art and part science. And, kind of think everyone kind of finds their position, and I feel like I've kind of found mine.
Awesome, man. I can't wait to hear about all the things that you've been doing in the past several years since we last linked up. Today, we're really going to focus on growing in large spaces, challenges that come with it, and how to overcome those challenges. So you've completely modified a shipping container to grow your plants in. And I know many growers are working in spaces really similar to that size or even larger. So let's dive into it and hear all about your setup. But first, can you introduce yourself for those that didn't catch the first episode we did together?
Sure. My name is Simon Romansky. Got into gardening from basically when I saw aeroponics and didn't understand that you can actually grow plants outside of soil, and thought it was really unique. And then also based on my background in web development, really kind of applied a lot of my more technical knowledge to sustaining living plants. And, that's kind of where I've realized what my real interest is. And, in the automation also comes a lot of it out of necessity because I'm often not here for weeks at a time. So I needed a way to be able to manage the plants without having to turn to that friend and say, can you come and water it? Can you come and, and if something goes wrong, you'd think, oh, you must have done something wrong. And, all the variables involved. So again, the automation's definitely my main area of interest, besides the plants themselves.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask you what your inspiration was behind the Plant Studio. For those folks that are just being introduced to Simon for the first time, he's got a website, plantstud.io. Put that in, and that'll get you to his website, Plant Studio. What was kind of your overall inspiration behind the Plant Studio, and how you ventured into the large scale cultivation, particularly using shipping containers. I think last time we linked up, it wasn't in a shipping container, it was in something else.
I began with a tent and I was doing aeroponics and quickly realized that, well, there's the whole air environment that you have to manage. So that's when I went into the basically like an insulated tent that was sealed and that had climate control and, had CO2. And I like the insulated tent aspect. And then from there, I quickly realized that it became difficult moving around the plant. So ultimately, I went to a container to, also get it out of the house because my wife wanted the extra space. And I also wanted to see if I could then take it to the next level and go outside with it and still be able to control regardless of what the outside variables are. And so I've just been basically, I wanted something that I could pick up and move potentially, and also really wanted to see when it came to shipping containers if they would be commercially viable to build something like that. Again, this is a 40-foot container. It would be possible to do it in, say, a 20-foot container, but it's again, it's just all about a lot of the automation for me in order for me to be able to manage it remotely.
Yeah, you mentioned 40-foot container. I know shipping containers come in various sizes. Some are 10 feet, some are 20 feet. What's the width and height of the container that you're using?
It's what they call a high cube. And a high cube, the containers are an extra 1.5 feet taller than your regular container. And it is also, it's obviously really well sealed. And the grow area itself is it is 30 feet by 4 feet for the beds and for the plants, and all told. So it's a pretty big machine, but it is all inclusive. So all systems are all integrated into the one unit.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I can imagine some people listening in on this are asking, well, why a shipping container? Can you talk to us about what advantages shipping containers offer over traditional grow spaces, like say like a warehouse or a greenhouse, in terms of like scalability and also control?
The thing I really like about a shipping container is that it's something that you can build it in one location and then you can move it to another. And typically when you have a warehouse, they retrofit a warehouse. They put the HVAC and the equipment on the roof. They build out the rooms, and a lot of that build out is really then tied into the building itself. And I just like the idea of being able to, build a container in one location and move it to another. And the other thing that I thought would be interesting is that with a warehouse, you are paying for warehouse space. And these containers, while you could stack them and place them inside a warehouse, ultimately, I think they'll be better off outside. These are insulated containers, which is very different from your typical like corrugated containers. The R value, I believe, is close to an R20, and they're very tightly sealed. And that's a big part of the work that I did was removing the existing refrigeration systems, because typically those refrigeration units are designed for either freezing or refrigerated produce. And I basically tied in consumer-based, efficient mini split, tied in with an the air circulation system in order to produce what I think is it's a really almost the ultimate grow system because it also is not dependent on environmental factors. Because a lot of people, it depends on their outside environment and where they live as to, the effects of what you have inside your grow environment. Like I know you being in Vegas, you have very dry, but you have a lot of sun. And here in Massachusetts, we have temperatures that can be 0 in the winter and 100 in the summer. The humidity in the winter is 15%, and in the summer, in the early mornings, you're hitting 100%. So my whole thing was, how can I have something that really doesn't matter what the outside environment is? I can dial in exactly the environment that I want. And I typically, given that I use CO2, I usually will run low 80s during the day, which I actually run at nighttime. At nighttime, it drops down to 70 degrees, and which is typically the daytime. So when you have the heat of the sun, which obviously still impacts the container, it's nighttime. Even though it's cooler, it's not having to deal with the heat of the lights. But then at nighttime, when it is naturally cooler and the lights are on, it's daytime to the plants. So again, it's all about, to me, efficiency and convenience. I'm not wanting to automate. I mean, I still love to go and look at the plants and see how everything is going. But again, for a lot of the time, I'm just not able to get in there. So I'm just remotely monitoring and controlling everything.
Yeah, I mean, controlling the environment with that huge temperature swing and humidity swing, that's definitely a key consideration. What else would you say is kind of a key consideration when setting up a grow operation in a shipping container?
The first thing I really was dealing with, like, how much grow area can I get in a container? Because I didn't want a support container. I wanted it to be an all-in-one unit where all of the HVAC, the dehumidification is all inside a single container. And, I ended up getting 7 lights in the grow area. And each one of those lights has their own 4x4 space on the sliding bench underneath. And the other part is there is a machine room that I wanted to be comfortable enough to be able to go inside it, to manage and to look at the reservoirs. And the other thing that was also very critical is the sizing of the HVAC. Can I keep it cool enough during the summer and warm enough during the winter? And the dehumidification on a sealed room is also crucial. I hold it. I go anywhere from 60 to 50% humidity, and it's got an integrated Quest 225 dehumidifier, which basically can do up to I believe it's 28 gallons a day. And so no matter what the transpiration for the potential for the plant count, it's all sized and designed to be able to accommodate, having a full container of plants.
That's awesome. Sounds like you have things real dialed in when it comes to the environment. I remember our last conversation, it seemed like you were very detailed when it comes to that. And it's so cool to see that you've dialed it in even more, with the dehumidifier. You said you've got a mini split in there. You've got air circulation going on, just everything that the plant needs in order to really be in the most ideal environment for them.
When you have a long container, part of the problem is it's not a very good space for moving air in a long corridor. So the whole design behind it was using in these refrigeration units, they have what is called T-slot floors. And those floors are typically used by the big HVAC equipment to blow the air underneath. And then they have pallets on it, and then the air circulates and comes back to the top. I basically refined that more, and the air comes out underneath the whole length of that sliding bench. And then the return is not just on one end, but the return is the entire length in the middle above the lights. So it's much more laminar, so that when the air comes out underneath the table, basically just goes around the table, up past the plants and into the return, which also makes it a lot more efficient, especially with something like dehumidification or even cooling, because the air that has gone through the air box, and the air box is where it is cooled or dehumidified, added CO2. When that air comes out, it will not go into that air box again until it gets up to the ceiling. So it makes for much more efficient use, especially I think with a dehumidifier, because a lot of people put the Quest dehumidifiers, they just slam them up into the ceiling, and it basically blasts out of one side or the two sides of the dehumidifier and pulls in from another. So it's just kind of swirling around, and you could imagine that air going back into the dehumidifier pretty quickly. But in this system, everything is actually ducted. And the mini split is not your typical wall mount wall mount unit where it takes in the hot air in the top and blows out the bottom. This is a mini split, but it is tied in more like your traditional air handler in a house. So I found that, because I monitor all the electrical usage still, and I believe even in the winter, and I'm not able to run all my lights, to have a full container, but I found is in the winter up to maybe $5 a day in electrical usage when, during full flower. So, and that's totally outside in February.
$5 a day on electricity, that's all you're paying?
Yeah, for the total. But again, depends on your kilowatt hour charge. Because again,
true.
for me, my kilowatt hour here is about 18 cents per 19 cents per kilowatt hour. But I've also actually really designed it, and I'm trying to work out, well, what would it take solar wise in order to be able to run this machine? Because whether you are using wind or solar, a large wind turbine I had worked out could run close to 2,000 containers. So, when people talk about something being green and they go, well, if it's indoors and that's not green, if you're still harnessing the light's photons, but you just happen to be storing them or using them, storing them in the battery and using them later, or using them on a less sunny day to kind of concentrate those, that energy to run your lights and actually potentially have a higher PPFD. I do think that there's, it could still be more of a green grow, and there's no comparison in the environmental control, because with me, there's really, I've had one failure of a grow, and all the plants did, and I do think it was more the genetics. And besides that, I just never really have a total failed grow. And to me, I treat it like a data center. It's got to be up and running at all times, and all the environment variables have to be dialed in.
Man, that cost per month is incredible. I know people who have home grows, which spend more money than that, and you're in a shipping container, a 40-foot shipping container. So hats off to you for making it real efficient.
A huge choice, a huge decision with a lot of the equipment. And I actually looked it up. The mini splits and their efficiency is actually more efficient than the cooling on the commercial side. And the fact that mini splits these days are more of a commodity item, and make so many, the cost to build them has come down significantly, even since we last spoke. And I think, I kind of take advantage of that.
Now, you said you have 7 lights in there. I saw the video on your website, and I see you have them basically in the center of the shipping container. So you said they're for a 4x4 coverage area. So it's 2 feet on each side clearance, kind of what you have for walking, and then the rolling benches can kind of go back and forth. Is that how that works?
Yeah, the rolling benches give almost close to an extra foot, so that when I want this, if you're manipulating, looking at the plants, just roll the bench over. The wiring for the irrigation zones comes up from underneath on like an umbilical cord and the drainage tubes and also the feed lines are also underneath. So as I slide it underneath, I have I have the cables and pipes kind of move with the table, but it's much more comfortable than the environment I had before where you feel like you have to crawl around. I just wanted something I could just stand up and be comfortable with with manipulating and enjoyed being in the space. That's also really part of the, when it comes to the lights, that was, a big part of my selection, my decision was I wanted, I use Mammoth bar lights. They have the Evo diodes. I thought was interesting because they actually have a little bit of green in them, which I know is kind of counter to what people have always said in the past. They've been really good, and the efficiency of them is great. I think it's about a 3.0 micromoles per joule efficiency. The other thing is with the lights is the lights are able to move up and down individually, and each one is also dimmable individually. So, ratchet straps are great when you want to, as your plants grow, moving up the light. But when the light is right in front of you and you want to reach in and manipulate or just move things around, it's nice to be able to hit a button, have the lights all get up and out of your way, and it's easy then to bring it back down. Because again, ratchet straps are kind of good in one direction. And also when I'm away, if I see the plants are really stretching, getting close to the light, I can then just remotely, lift up a light. And the lights actually know what height they're at. And also each winch system, which I actually couldn't find one. So I kind of created my own from scratch. But while I did that, I also tied in the dimmer control. And so each light also plugs into that winch controller, and I can individually dim all of the lights. So that I thought would be helpful so I could do more testing on light intensity and, to basically dealing with the lights. Because the other thing you realize is while the table might shift, the light doesn't move. And so, again, that's why I spent a lot of time designing the light control, the light winches, basically.
That's so awesome that there's that flexibility built in. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes and challenges that people face is not leaving enough space to maneuver around in there, not just physical walking space, but like you mentioned, when you're trying to get in there and manipulate the plants, whether it be training, defoliation, whatever, and you're kind of hovering over, having that light inches away from you is kind of a pain. So being able to have it easily raise up so you have plenty of clearance above the plants as well is awesome.
Yeah, it definitely makes it a lot more comfortable because that's a big consideration. I wanted it to be kind of really clean. I think of it almost like an Apple store where you go in and it's very minimalistic and just, focus on there. And I just want to focus on the plants. And the noise is a huge consideration. All the fans and the circulation are all brushless motor fans, much more efficient. And again, I just wanted to be enjoyable to be in there. In the middle of winter, I've got shades on, it's 80 degrees, 50% humidity. And, I've got my music blasting in the corner, and it's actually just a joy to be in there. So, because you're in a container and you don't want to feel, I was worried about feeling claustrophobic. But it's almost like the opposite. I almost feel like when I go into the container, at least especially in the winter, you almost feel like you're going outside. So, that was a big part of the consideration when making, the whole design of this container.
That makes sense. Now, I know last time we spoke, you had basically, you got to refresh my memory here, but it was like your own software I think you were working on to where all the controls were kind of built into it. Are your lights in that same software? Like, how has that software advanced? Is your lights now attached to it, or what?
It's changed quite a lot since I spoke to you last, because before I had computers like these, they're called Raspberry Pis, these inexpensive, they call them single board computers. And I had those hooked up to a lot of sensors. Since then, I've really tied into these little things. Basically, they're called microcontrollers. So those are little Wi-Fi devices that I then connect to sensors or controllers, pumps, things like that. And now these microcontrollers cost no more than $5 a piece. They have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, little computer. You can do little write programs on them, and they're very inexpensive. So all of my sensors and controls, irrigation, air circulation, all are now basically more modular on these microcontrollers. They still do talk to the base, that same computer, but now there's actually only one of them, and that one gathers all the data, does where you can look at the graphs or open up your control systems where you can set the humidity, control the lights and everything. So everything is very modular, and all speaks to one main system that basically can talk to everything from environmental control. The mini split can be controlled via. I created my own controller for the Quest that will then tie into the system, so it's its own control. I wanted something where, again, I want to, it's in programming terms, they call it an API, and all that basically means it allows something else to be able to control that and read the information. And, it started with one system controlling it. And I think these days, I'm working towards, seeing if AI could even help and have some suggestions, because it knows what the system logs. When I dose a certain liquid, it's logged. And so the system can know that. So everything I change is also logged and can be seen. So again, it's more simple, I would say, the system now, but much more elegant than it was before.
And now, can you control that through your cell phone as well, or is it computer only?
No, it's actually cell phone first.
Wow.
Because I realized that a lot of times if you get an alarm or you want to do something, your phone is what you always have on you. So I actually design it for the cell phone first, but then I have dashboards that are much bigger to kind of sit back and look at everything. But no, absolutely everything in there is controllable through the web application that ties everything together. And I actually have this 35 devices in the container. It's got its own Wi-Fi. There's actually 35 Wi-Fi devices on that network, including the master, the little control computer. So, it's cell phone first. But again, a lot of times I'll, Chromecast it to a screen in my house or something with the dashboard, just because I like seeing all the lines and stuff like that and seeing what's going on. Like the other day, I was away and I forgot to have my CO2 tank, my backup CO2 tank wasn't there. It ran out of CO2. And so I quickly turned and dimmed down the light. I dropped down the temperature to, slow down photosynthesis. And basically, I was coming home anyway, and I knew I could kind of hold out until I got back. So I was able to make those changes so that the plants weren't stressed and, didn't use up all the available CO2. So, that was a nice thing. And since then I've come back and, filled up the tank, and, every problem I have, I try and come up with 2 solutions. So, it's just, to keep it as stress-free and hopefully even just labor-free as possible. But I'm not looking to make, it's not, I enjoy being around the plant still. So that's, also I enjoy being around the plants more when I feel like I also have less busy work and grunt work that I have to do.
I hear you. Yeah, it sounds like you have done so much work into making it completely automated. And sure, us home growers, we have automation built in. You get a controller now. There are several different companies that have controllers that
Mhm.
control the temperature, humidity, airflow, and stuff like that. But yours is like next level. Like you've built these systems on your own. So you're doing way beyond what the average person is doing. And it's so cool to hear. Now, I know that you also have cameras in place as well, and you're trying to, correct me if I'm wrong, you're trying to utilize AI in the future to kind of sense the plant's health.
Yeah, it's no, I remember talking about AI back in the previous podcast almost 4 years ago, and I had no idea it would come as far as it has in such a short amount of time. And it's not only helped me a lot with the code of the existing system, but also the potential of system being able to look at your plants, diagnose certain issues, and then maybe even make corrective changes and then see what the outcome of that change is. The nice thing is, a lot of times when they say that you have a problem and you can throw 2, 3 different solutions at it and it's fixed, and you go, well, which one of those was it? Or was it even something totally different? So, I am definitely a proponent of keep the changes to a minimal, because then it gives you a better feel for what impact those changes do or do not have. But AI it's your friend. It's there, and I think the more people that use it, the better off they can be. You can take a picture of a plant, and it can give suggestions. It's not always right, but it's a lot better than what a lot of people think they know about it. Also, I found so it's a great tool.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who kind of doubt its reliability because when you get a deficiency, sure, some are easily recognizable, right? Nitrogen deficiency, for example, right, is going to be yellowing, starting at the tip, starting at the bottom of the plant, and working its way up from the tip of the leaf to the petiole. Other things, though, there's some yellowing that happens like in the middle of the plant or, purple stems, where really it's a little bit tougher to diagnose because it could be multiple things. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm interested to see in the future how AI kind of handles that and its accuracy on some of these plant deficiencies that's recognizing and giving suggestions on. Because, sure, I don't think anybody wants to be suggested a solution and then implement it and find out it's being wrong, or making things worse. So, I think that's kind of the biggest scare when it comes to kind of AI, these cameras recognizing deficiencies and then making suggestions.
Yep. And that's the thing. When it comes to growing, I realized that in order to grow successfully, you really, and every time, having control over your environments is so key in ensuring that you have a successful grow. And it's almost the most simple thing to do in a way. Sometimes the hard thing is making decisions as to, when it comes to the nutrients, whether it's organic or it's salt-based nutrients. That can be very tricky. But, especially with the just environment, the air and the humidity and things like that, that is almost the easiest thing to control if you have the right setup. But that's just my experience.
From a small home grower perspective, I agree with you on that one for sure. Let's get deeper into your style of growing in that container. Are you in soil, cocoa, hydroponic system? Are you using organic nutrients, synthetic nutrients? What's your style of gardening in there?
Primarily rock wool, because it is innate by default. It's very consistent, and it works very well with drip irrigation, because it does, when you drip irrigate, it does kind of wick out of capillary action, right? It does saturate the block really well. And also it's so small and it's so easy to move a plant. When you have rock wool, you can literally take out the plug, the dripper, and just pick it up and move it when they're small before they get locked in with trellising. But recently I adopted a friend's soil grow, because again, he wasn't around and the environmental conditions were getting the better of him. So I've switched out my drippers for basically these cones with two sprayers, and it sprays all on almost a 1 foot diameter water on the top of the dry amendments that I've been scratching into the surface. So it's a kind of different for me. It's purely organic, and I have to say, they're in 7-gallon pots, but these plants are doing fantastic. And I'm not using my typical dosing system, but it's been really interesting, and I'm actually really enjoying organic soil grow right now. So again, I like all different cultivation methods, and in this container, you really can, adapt it to almost any grow method.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I saw in your video you've got, I think, 256-gallon drums or something with dosing, and then it's really cool. I didn't know about that you're doing organic in there now in 7-gallon pots. That's awesome. Like you said, that you have the flexibility to either use a dosing system with synthetic nutrients or scratching in some amendments into organic pots and then growing it that way. Now, you have sprayers, drip irrigation. How about the moisture level in the medium? Can you talk to us a little bit about how you're looking at that or monitoring that?
Yeah, I've done, this is where it comes back to the sensors, because I'm always interested in finding new sensors. And, you see a lot of those, the new sensors that do the volumetric water content. And I've got some of those that I'm actually currently trying to tie into those microcontrollers. What I've been using that actually works really well, and I've had this since since we spoke last, having right now my plants are all sitting on their own scale. And so when I irrigate each plant, and I can irrigate each one individually remotely, as I irrigate it, I can see the weight increase. So I know that the irrigation system in the plant is getting what it, I know exactly how much water I've given it and when I've given it, because I don't have to log it. I can just look back on the weight of that plant, because every single sensor that gathers data reports back to the database on a minute by minute basis. Again, that's I've been doing that for years, and that's really just thanks to a lot of these great databases and software tools that are available. So not only knowing how much water I've put in, but the interesting part also is seeing the transpiration speed of the plant, because, as they transpire, they obviously lose a lot of their weight, and I can see how quickly they're losing weight. And I can set it up on an individual plant to water it every time it gets to a certain weight. But I also do want to tie in the moisture other moisture sensors. I've done ones that are resistive based, conductive based. Again, there's lots of different sensors out there, but the one that has been the most helpful has been just the weight of the plants. But again, I always look at new sensors and see how they can get tied into the system.
They are so beneficial sensors. I've been using the EcoWit ones. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one or not, but it's so awesome to be able to just stick that into the medium, look at my phone and see a percentage moisture and kind of read the plants. Okay, what percentage moisture are they happy about? And it varies depending on the medium, right? I run Fox for Motion Forest soil. It's going to be a lot lower of percentage than something like bioflower soil, which is heavy in cocoa, or just a straight cocoa mix. You can take more water in there. But the convenience of being able to see the moisture level, water according to that, or know, hey, I've overwatered at that point. You can clearly see it and kind of make adjustments from there. You're going off the weight, which you found to be a little bit more accurate. I thought that's interesting.
It works well, at least for the knowing how much I'm giving them. But again, with these the sensors, because typically the ones that have they have these spikes, and you can get the ones and they plug into like your Rockwool cubes. It's extremely expensive when you buy those sensors, and basically found that a lot of them are produced by a single manufacturer, and these sensors that you can pay hundreds of dollars for, you can find these online for $25 to $50, depending on what they measure. Some of them do pH a little bit. I don't think they're super accurate on pH. They're not too bad. EC, I definitely, or volumetric water content, they can do well. Temperature, they can do well. Some of them claim that they can do like nitrites and phosphorus levels, but there's really nothing to that. That's not true. So those other sensors found that sensor, realized you don't have to pay hundreds of dollars, but again, you have to kind of spend the time, figure out how to tie it into this controller. But once you've put in that time and then done it, it's very easy to then replicate from there. So again, that's my on my to-do for my next sensor to, just dial it in more.
That's so cool. Now, how about the plants as far as size? Like, how long are you vegging these plants for? And what do you do for plant training? I
veg typically only at a minimum 2 weeks, maybe up to 4 weeks. My consideration is always my limit in height when growing inside the container. Now, it is the high cube container. The top of the table is 1 foot above the ground, and then I designed the winches to go and bring the light as high to the ceiling as possible. I can accommodate up to like a 6-foot plant, about max is what I can have in there. So again, when it comes to vegetation and flipping, I don't want it to obviously grow beyond that 6-foot plant. I know it depends on the plant and how they stretch. 6 feet is my limit. I do top plants a minimum of once. I try to do 2. I will defoliate. And as far as the actual, like the low stress training, because I do trellis netting and I do a couple layers of trellis netting. Again, because the table kind of has the post holders designed into it. I used to trellis plants individually, but the effort and time, the netting just is a lot simpler. And so when I put that first set of netting in and the second, I often will kind of widen out the plants to just get as much, to get them as much photon exposure as possible. Just because it really is a case of maximizing the photons that light produces is a huge part of the efficiency of that. And that's also, again, depending on your lights, the lights that I run, the ideal height is 1 foot from the top of the canopy. So I don't do anything too crazy with the plants. I try not to stress them.
Pretty straightforward there. Now, how about pest prevention? Do you have an IPM routine that you follow, or have you come across any major pest infestations that you need to battle? Or
I haven't had any since I've grown in the container.
wow.
Granted, I've only done a few runs, but the only time I had an issue with soil with fungus gnats, and I think that kind of came with the soil. And besides that, I've never had any pests. I never spray the plants just because there's no need to for me. And so I don't really have any, I don't do any pest prevention just really because I just don't have them.
Lucky.
Lucky it's part for sure. Of the control. When it's a sealed environment, yeah. I'm also not pumping anything from the outside in. And, when I do the clean out of the container, because it's a sealed container, another thing that works really well is a ozone generator. Ozone generator is also a great way to run it before putting plants to make sure that if there's anything growing where it shouldn't be growing, it kind of kills it off. So keeping really clean in the grow environment is a huge help, but I do think primarily because it's a totally sealed environment, that's really what the reason behind not having any pests. And I found, even though it's outside, I worried about going in and out of the container. Am I going to be letting any pests in? But, part of the consideration, because I put a side door on the container, so I didn't go through the double doors. mainly because the machine room is sectioned off from the grow area, so that even if on a sunny day, I can open up and go inside the machine room, but in the grow area, which is behind the sliding door, which is blacked out, it's pitch black. So that was also a big part of the design of it, is to not, number one, have any light get to the plants when it shouldn't, but also in the middle of winter, and it's, could be 5 degrees outside. I didn't want that burp of cold air to come in and hit the plants and shock them. So by having kind of that double trap system really helps keep a much smoother, more level environment. So, that was another consideration for, the design of the machine room in the container.
Smart. Yeah, only coming across fungus gnats, that's fantastic. Those are, in my opinion, one of the easier pests to battle. Now, I know these days a lot of folks, what they're doing is they're using UVC light in order to kind of, as a pest preventative, and also battling some small infestations. Have you ventured into UVC light at all?
I haven't. Some people have used UVC to clean and try and sterilize. The only issue with that is the light has to reach whatever it is that it's trying to kill. So if it was behind something shaded from it, it wouldn't do it, whereas the ozone does. However, I could see the benefit of using something like that if it was, again, based on its application. I was going to have a UVC light in the air box where all of the air is circulated through, so it could potentially, kill any spores that, it might see as it goes through. But I just haven't had the need to do that yet. But, never say never.
Makes sense. I know you're venturing into all these different areas, so I think it's only a matter of time before where you're like, oh, what's next for me? Up UVC. Here we go. All right, let's go.
Exactly.
One thing I really want to ask you, we have a lot of people growing in large spaces. What's your biggest piece of advice for someone who's growing in a large space for the first time?
I would say, this is me coming from me, what I found really helpful is monitoring your conditions, because then you can know what you might need to address. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of these controllers these days that you can get that are relatively inexpensive, that have graphs and show you the history of your grow environment. So, because some people go, look, the temperature's fine, but then in the middle of night it had dropped to this, or at some point it might have spiked to that, and you don't see it. So I do think being able to see like the history of your grow environment can be really helpful. And again, just so sensors are just critical for that. And there's the cost of them, and the implementation has really come down a lot. When you buy your own sensor and these microcontrollers, like for example, like my CO2 system, the sensor that I use is extremely accurate. You can get it for $40, and I tie it into a microcontroller. So, for $45, you can get an accurate, and it also does temperature and humidity. It doesn't do those as accurately. It's pretty good for that also. But again, just sensors and logging, that'd be my advice, is just controlling the environment helps immensely.
Well, all right. And if the listeners wanted to find you, can you let us know where they can find you? And is there anything upcoming releases or projects that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, as you mentioned in the beginning, Plant Studio, which is plantstud.io, the URL is basically my site where you can actually go and I have a 1-minute video that shows exactly what this container's about. As far as upcoming projects, I've been considering doing a grow and maybe posting and doing it more online, and having maybe like weekly updates, or maybe, hey, choose what kind of grow method you'd like to see, and then kind of apply it to the system. But instead of, some growers show, it's been a successful grow and here's how I did, and they compile it all, at the end, I was thinking maybe it'd be interesting to do like a weekly where people could look and see the plants, maybe give some feedback as to what they might think needs to be done. And then I could look and implement those changes potentially and then report back. And so basically it's almost like an interactive grow, regardless of the outcome, success or failure. I think, you learn a lot, sometimes more from the failures, in fact. But, again, I haven't had total failures, but I've certainly had issues with plants that have really made me scratch my head. And, I'm sure probably some of your viewers would even know exactly what was going on there. I tend to be stronger in the automation and the systems than sometimes just the cultivation part and the nutrients side of things. So, that's just something I was interested in. And, if anyone had any suggestions of what they think could be a good application for the container, I'd be really interested to hear what people think.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely have a link to Simon's social media down in the YouTube description section below, so you can easily get a hold of him and talk to him if you'd like. I'll put a link to the last episode we did. I'll put that in the description section as well. That was a great conversation. Even though it was 3 years old, there's still a lot of good information within that episode. So I'll have that link down there. What questions do you have for Simon? Let us know down in the comment section below. Maybe in a year or two, we can get you back on here again and get some of these questions answered and hear about
that'd be great.
The other updates that you have going on, because I'm sure you're going to be doing more and more with this over the next several years. That's just the way your mind works, I can tell.
Yeah, I'd love to see. I mean, again, these containers you can stack up to 8 tall.
Wow!
So they're amazing for what they are, and at the cost the cost of this whole setup though was pretty expensive, but a lot of that was in the lights and the HVAC and stuff. So any questions people have that we might not have answered, I'm happy to share with people and go from there.
Perfect. And I definitely want to give a big shout out to the folks supporting on Patreon, patreon.com/MrGrowIt. 100% of what is donated through Patreon goes right back into the podcast. The folks being scrolled on the screen right now are in the producer tier. Special thanks to you for your contributions. Simon, thanks so much, man. Great conversation. Really happy to hear the update and what you've been doing over the past several years. It sounds so awesome, man. And sometimes, man, when I'm back in Massachusetts, maybe I could pay you a visit. It'd be really cool to see that in person.
Please do. I'd love it. That'd be great. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. This was great.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much. I'll catch y'all in the next episode. Peace out.